Mr. President, I rise again, I'm afraid, to make the same old hoary speech that I've been making here for several years, and that is, it is my opinion that you do not really understand the concept of banking. All the banks are broke. Bank Santander, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, they're all broke. And why are they broke? It isn't an act of God. It isn't some sort of tsunami. They're broke because we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that banks can lend money that they don't actually have. It's a criminal scandal, and it's been going on for too long. To add to that problem, you have moral hazard, a very significant moral hazard from the political sphere. And most of the problem starts in politics and central banks, which are part of the same political system. We have counterfeiting, sometimes called quantitative easing, but counterfeiting by any other name. The artificial printing of money, which if any ordinary person did, they'd go to prison for a very long time. And yet governments and central banks do it all the time. Central banks repress the amount of interest that rates are, so we don't have the real cost of money, and yet we blame the real retail banks for manipulating LIBOR. The sheer effrontery of this is quite astonishing. It's central banks that manipulate interest rates, Commissioner. And plus, underneath all this, we talk loosely, in a rather cavalier fashion, do we not, about deposit guarantees. So when banks go broke through their own incompetence and chicanery, the taxpayer picks up the tab. It's theft from the taxpayer. And until we start sending bankers, and I include central bankers and politicians, to prison for this outrage, it will continue.
For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
Law, language, money, the three paradigms of spontaneously grown institutions. Now, fortunately, law and language have been allowed to develop. Money has originated in original form, but as soon as it was there in its most primitive form, it was frozen. After 200 or 300 years of coins, all governments put their hands and stopped any further developments. Governments said it must not develop any further. We were not allowed to experiment on it. Money hasn't been improved. Money has rather become worse in the course of time. And what we have had since in development are matters of government inventions, mostly wrong, mostly abuses of money.
I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
And I have come to the position of asking, has monetary policy ever done any good? I don't think it has. I think it has done only harm, and that's why I am now pleading for what I've called denationalization of money.
How do you think that it would work? Would the major banks such as Chase Manhattan issue currencies or gold coins issued? How would it?
Well, the governments can stop people from issuing money. They can hardly stop them from opening accounts in something. After all, in the modern world, hand-to-hand money, coins, and paper is no longer the most important. Credits and credit cards are a substitute. So I think we can forget about existing money and existing banks, and we'll gradually open a system of accounts which will displace money.
That's a fascinating concept. Maybe the unit one day will be known as the Hayek.
I don't believe that we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. Because we can't take them violently out of the hands of government. All we can do is, by some sly roundabout way, introduce something they can't stop.
When money is easy to make, society begins to break.
So, how do we make money that's easy to carry but hard to create?
Well, one solution is Bitcoin. Back in 2008, I became fed up with government money, with the corruption, the manipulation, so I created a digital currency. Digital money that can be sent directly from one person to another without any bank or government involved. And the best part? It's hard money.
It's the hardest money ever invented!
Bitcoin is very hard to make more of. Each new coin gets added to the supply only after a computer works very hard to solve a math problem, where there's no shortcut and solving it costs a lot of energy and time.
Okay, but if it's on a computer, can't I just copy and paste?
Not with Bitcoin. You see, there's a public record of every Bitcoin ever created. It's called the blockchain. It's like a puzzle, and each Bitcoin has its own unique shape. And because everyone has a copy of the public record, if someone tries to fake a Bitcoin, it won't fit the puzzle and will be rejected by the network before anyone can use it. That's why Bitcoin is so safe from criminals and the government.
You said criminals twice.
And unlike dollars, which can be printed endlessly, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. It's almost impossible to inflate. The only way to get it is to earn it or buy it from someone who has.
Aha!
No offense, but if you control Bitcoin, couldn't you manipulate it just like the government?
I don't control it. No one person does. It's controlled by a public network of Bitcoin users that anyone can join. So if someone wanted to change something in Bitcoin's code, they would need to get the majority of the millions of Bitcoin users to agree to it, or the change doesn't happen. And when has the majority of us agreed on anything?
One-ply toilet paper is garbage!
Touché.
Wow, I didn't know made-up money could make so much sense.
Today, millions of people send Bitcoin instantly and cheaply to each other around the world without any bank or government involved. And because Bitcoin is hard money you can't just print more of, the more people who use it, the more valuable it becomes.
Emily, if we take Lyle's Bitcoin, we could be rich!
I could pay for college entirely! You could outsource your movie and pay to have your name in the credits.
Slow down. I'm not saying that Bitcoin will make you rich quick, or even at all. Right now, only about 1% of the world owns Bitcoin. And because it's still being adopted, some days it goes up and even down.
Also, investments, though potentially lucrative, can be risky.
Only invest what you're willing to lose. We know. Wow, I think I get it. Good money should be easy to use, but hard to create.
And because Bitcoin is digital, it's fast and cheap to use. And the blockchain makes it hard to inflate.
Thanks, Mr. Satoshi.
What?
Mr. Satoshi?
He's gone?
Or was he ever even here?
Look, I think one of the attractions to Bitcoin, certainly for me, but for many, is as a hedge against inflation. And particularly when you have irresponsible politicians in Washington that spend money like drunken sailors, which is actually not fair to the sailors, because at least they're spending their own money, and that print trillions and trillions of dollars. We see inflation all across the country. That was driven by this spending binge that happened the last 2 years in Washington, and it unleashed significant inflation. I think Bitcoin is an important check against that. I think it is also powerful in that it is decentralized, in that it is far less susceptible to government control.
It seems that many of our nation's foremost financial innovators on the Democratic side of the aisle or at the Federal Reserve, they're very upset at the possibility that you might take your money out of the system and put it into something like Bitcoin. Now, full disclosure, I own Bitcoin, I own Ethereum. I'm big advocates for both. I think that Bitcoin is excellent. I think that the possibility of a currency that is not under the centralized control of a government with its own political priorities, I think putting some of your money there is a good idea, which is why I own Bitcoin. I think Ethereum, which is attempting to cut down on the banking system's transaction costs by creating all sorts of innovative new ways to create a trustless financial system, that is a good thing. Understand that the innovation that Bitcoin represents and that a lot of decentralized finance represents is a way to cut out the middleman. The reason that you go to a bank is because banks verify your transactions, right? You know that when you put your money in a bank, the bank is going to be held accountable if the money is gone, right? So you trust the bank, which is why you put your money in the bank. But that also means massive transaction costs, because every time you run a credit card, the credit card company has to get in touch with the middleman then has to get in touch with the bank. There are like 7 or 8 companies involved in every credit card transaction, which is why it takes 2 or 3 days for a credit card transaction to actually clear. You know this if you own a business, that just because someone swiped the credit card, it doesn't mean the money is now in your account. Now the money has to go all the way through the system of verification in order for the money to reach your account. When it comes to international transactions, it can take like a week for an international transaction to clear. When it comes to decentralized finance, these transactions can clear like that very, very quickly. And in areas of the world, particularly impoverished areas of the world, where you don't have a good banking system, if you're in Afghanistan, you can't deposit your money in a bank account because there are no banks. What Bitcoin does, what decentralized finance allows, is for you to have that money digitally and transfer it digitally instantaneously. That's a very good thing for the world. The other attraction of it is that you don't have a centralized government that is going to inflate the currency, where you put your money in a bank and then you just wait for the government to inflate it out of existence, right? If you took $100 and you put it in the bank at a 0% interest rate, just to make the math easy, back in like 1980, and then you took that $100 out of the bank today, it'll be worth like, I don't know, $50, $60, maybe. Okay, so like the inflation rates eat away at savings. This is not true with Bitcoin. Right? When you buy Bitcoin or any other form of crypto that is worth its salt, then what you are actually doing is you are buying a value that is not dependent on infusions of money into the system. Right? So that is the attraction of Bitcoin.
Things. America's either going to go into authoritarianism, the world is, authoritarianism, or it's going to be freer than it ever has been. And I'm counting on technology to empower people like they've never been able to. So if we just look at this chalkboard, the only thing really is up at the top that I think we need to cover is you get rid of the banks, right? Yeah. You get rid of the Federal Reserve, all of the central banks. Yes. You get rid of all of the stuff we think we need now because of old technology. And it is...
The dollar is old technology. That's a good way to put it.
It's almost just a barter system, right?
Trustless peer-to-peer system, direct transfer of funds, no trust in one central point of failure.
So I talked to my kids when I came home from Silicon Valley, and I said, kids, I want you to understand, they're in their 20s, and I said, I want you to understand, Dad knows nothing on this. This is just my gut. But I'm taking some of my money and I'm investing in Bitcoin, and I recommend any money that you have, you put a reasonable amount in Bitcoin, because if it works, A, it will guarantee some freedom, and B, it won't collapse as the system collapses, and C, it will go up in value, correct?
Correct.
And so it's a risky, I guess, at this point, but it's almost like looking at Edison and going, I just saw this light bulb and I don't even know how that works yet. But I think if it works, it's going to be huge.
For me,
and so you would think this is a good thing, right? This is a good alternative, and it takes enormous amounts of power away from the government. This is why the government is so scared crapless of cryptocurrency. They are scared so crapless of it that you are going to stop. Like if cryptocurrency ever became a denomination in use, not denominated in dollars, but things started to be denominated in Bitcoin, or you started trading in Bitcoin. It's not stable enough right now for people to really trade in Bitcoin. This is one of the problems with Bitcoin, is that it used to be that there was this concept that Bitcoin would be used in transactions, right? Instead of paying for a car in dollars, you pay for it in Bitcoin. The problem is because Bitcoin is still volatile, because not enough people buy it and use it. Because of that, the price of a Bitcoin could go up or down. So if you sell a car for a Bitcoin and the Bitcoin is worth $30,000 today, so you're selling a car for 30 grand, tomorrow that Bitcoin could be worth $20,000, and so you just lost $10,000, right? So this is the problem with Bitcoin, but it's going to get more stable over time as there is more and more buy-in. The government is so scared of this stuff. They are so scared of this stuff. They're afraid that they're no longer going to be able to control your monetary future. Unfortunately, the same time, these people are saying you should trust the full faith and credit of the United States and you should crack down on Bitcoin. Elizabeth Warren is doing the same thing, right? She's saying decentralized finance is really bad because it allows for illegal transactions. Oh, what does cash do? What is it? Also, you know what's one thing that has allowed for massive illegal transactions? A government-based banking system that has essentially created massive incentives to bail out companies who take bad risks. I mean, seriously, what is more dangerous to the stability and health of the world economy? Truly, what's more dangerous? The fact that some people use decentralized finance to do drug deals, or the fact that every time there's a financial crisis, the taxpayers are on the hook for trillions of dollars? Which one seems more risky to you?
There was a point to all that. Part of the reason that Bitcoin is attractive to people is because we all have the sense right now, and that's certainly part of the reason why so many of you are here tonight, is that there's a little bit too much tyranny going on. And that's the collusion of large-scale enterprises at the top. And so there are attempts to push back on that by developing decentralized systems. And the idea that we could develop a decentralized standard of universal value, which is what money is a very interesting idea. And so we could, in principle, and this seems to be what's happening, is allow a variety of currencies to battle with one another on the competitive landscape. And we sort of have that internationally because every currency has to trade against every other currency. And now we've added cryptocurrency to that mix. And that seems to me to be a good experimental option. And maybe Bitcoin will aggregate to itself the value that its adherents claim. But that remains to be seen, and it doesn't mean it's a pathway without pitfalls, right? Because we imagine Bitcoin was successful and all of a sudden we never had any control over, we really never were able to exercise control over our monetary system again. Because that's what it would mean, because it really is decentralized. And if Bitcoin and the blockchain technology truly obtained the upper hand, we would have put our economic system outside of the political domain. Now, you can make a case that maybe that would be an okay thing, right? Because you don't want the standard of value subordinate to political machination. But it also means that it's no longer subordinate to the collective will, the collective express will of the people as manifested in the electoral process. And we don't know if that would be a good thing. And it's a hell of an experiment to run because you won't know the outcome until you can't alter the results of the experiment. So, you know, I have some investment in Bitcoin because I'm curious about it, and it's a compelling idea. It's a genius idea, but that doesn't mean that it's destined for success. So I'm pro-decentralization. I like the idea that mendacious, short-term oriented, narcissistic, power-mad politicians can't inflate the currency and steal value from people to fund their idiot pet projects. But you know, revolutionary changes usually bring about radically unintended consequences. So, and I think that's why the marketplace is still toying with Bitcoin, you know, instead of rushing headlong into its embrace, let's say. So that's what I think about Bitcoin.